Hello, greetings. Nice to see you again. Welcome back. People all over the world, all different time zones. It's amazing. Amazing what Tashi Coleman has put together here. It's an incredible program for all of us to explore the path of the Buddha through the teachings of Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, with the blessings of Dzongtsar Khyentse Rinpoche. Honored and delighted to be here with you again today. And I think the thing that brings us together is the fundamental teachings of the Buddha. After his enlightenment at Bodh Gaya, he goes to Rajagriha and he meets up with his former companions and he turns the wheel of the Dharma for the first time. And he teaches the four truths. The four truths, the four realities of our existence as human beings, as sentient beings. Nothing mystical, nothing otherworldly. He begins with the experience of suffering, dukkha, that we all experience and all can relate to. We have to begin our path by acknowledging suffering. And then he states that suffering is not self-existent. Suffering is produced. It comes about through situations, through a complex of situations. And so then he presents the cause of suffering. In his traditional account of this first teaching, the cause of suffering is desire, attachment, thirst. This is what is the most tangible step just before suffering. We were attached to something that is not real, not a real source of pleasure, not a real source of happiness or relief from suffering, because it's impermanent and insubstantial. Later teachings on this scheme of the Four Noble Truths, or the Four Truths for Noble Ones, as it's now commonly translated, explain the second Noble Truth more deeply as being karma and klesha are the causes of suffering. And this is working backwards in the progression of the production of suffering in our experience. Just before attachment, there's the karmic momentum that propels us into the experience, the feeling of attachment to what is not real, to what is not actually something that we want. And that karmic momentum arises through klesha, through neurotic engagement with our existence. We have the root kleshas of attachment, aversion or aggression, and stupidity. with stubborn thickness, ignoring quality. And continuing to work backwards, we discover that the inner kleshas are wrong view, a wrong view of reality. A wrong view based on ignorance. Ignorance that mistakes for real what is not real. The self, the owner of experience, the experiencer, the solidity and permanence of the world around us. All of these are mistakes, bewilderment, ignorance. In the Third Noble Truth, the Buddha reveals that when you eliminate the cause, then you eliminate the result. And so suffering can come to an end by eliminating its cause. By undoing the collection of causes and conditions that come about to create that situation of suffering. Kleshas, karma, ignorance. Actually, better in the order of working backwards. Karma, klesha, ignorance. So ignorance as the root. And in the fourth truth, the Buddha explains the path to that situation, a path to the unraveling of suffering, the spinning, constant cycling that we call samsara. And that path has 8 factors, which begins with right view. And right view is understanding correctly the nature of reality, correcting that mistaken view of ignorance. He provides a list of 5 that include things like thinking that your understanding of reality is the only true understanding. Or thinking that there is a universal panacea of doing some ritual, some activity. That is the answer. Standing on your head for hours every day is the only way. And he brings this up because there were people that did that at that time. And there are people that do similar things today, focusing on one activity as being the panacea for all ills. But most importantly, he explains that the root of it all is the mistaken view of what he calls the transitory collection of the factors of our existence, the mistaken view of the transitory factors of our existence. All of the factors of what we call us, of what we experience as us, all of those factors are impermanent, constantly changing. So there's no ongoing, enduring essence that doesn't change. When we talk about impermanence, it's not the experience of growing old over time, or the fact that we all know we're going to die at some point. Those are parts of the understanding of impermanence. But the most profound understanding of impermanence is that when we say things change, we make the mistake of thinking that there's something that is changing. And that implies that there's some aspect of that thing that exists moment to moment and possesses the aspects of having been changed. And that is the root of false view. That there is no continuity. There is nothing that is changed. Because nothing persists for more than 2 moments, for more than 1 moment. So all of the factors of our existence are constantly changing, interacting with each other and with external conditions and causes to produce the next moment of experience. So the Buddha identifies the root situation of suffering. He embodies the absence of suffering, the result, the possibility that all of us have to transform this situation of suffering. He provides the problem, explains the cause of the problem, the 2 obstructions to enlightenment, kleshas, neurotic, emotional reactions that are caused by the ignorance that confuses a collection of factors as being a me, an I. And he provides a path that begins with right understanding, correcting that mistaken understanding of the factors of existence. And upon that basis, then cultivating right intention not to harm, not to cause harm. To conduct our lives in accordance with the way that karma works. To cultivate virtue and to reduce non-virtue, and to cultivate meditation, mindfulness, and awareness in all of its different ramifications or types, which ultimately boil down to the 2 practices of shamatha, which is calm, abiding meditation, and vipassana, which is insight meditation. The culmination of that path is bringing together the view and the meditation, bringing the view into meditation. And so it's key to cultivate all these factors together in support of each other, in particular study and practice. One without the other will not produce the result we're seeking. So don't exclusively meditate without study, and don't just study without meditating. Cultivate both of these as much as you can. Learn what meditation is, why and how we meditate. meditate upon what we learn. Meditate as a way of learning. Meditative experience of suffering. Meditative experience of how we create suffering every moment. By mistaking the collection of factors that we experience as being me. The Buddha presented a number of ways of understanding those factors of existence. Today we might say, well, there's body and mind. Or maybe we would say there's body, emotions, and mind. He presented the 6 senses and their objects. He presented a number of schemes like this, all as ways of understanding that we're a collection of many different aspects of experience. And in each of those different ways of understanding our collection, we think there's an I, a continuity. Someone that possesses those factors, someone that is independent of those factors. And that is our fundamental bewilderment, which gives rise to kleshas, conflicting emotional reactions, and that propels karma, thinking, acting, speaking from the point of view of that mistaken understanding, and that perpetuates suffering. The Buddha's teachings were collected after his death into his sermons or his discourses, the rules for the monastic community. And then there was a collation of that material, in particular his teachings, a condensation into a set of teachings called Abhidharma. The Abhidharma is meant to be the essence of his teachings on Dharma. Dharma meaning the way things are. Dharma also means the teachings of the Buddha. And thirdly, Dharma means that which is. And Buddha distinguished 2 main groupings of the way things are. There's the way that we imagine things are through our conceptual mind. And then there's the way things actually are. The way things actually are is an impermanent flux of causes and conditions. A flux of energy that does not contain names or labels. That doesn't form magically into chairs and tables and computers. Reality is minute factors of existence called dharmas, plural. And on the other hand, there's all the things that we think. There's me, other, big, small, round, square, inside, outside, concept, the world of concept. So he came up with this sense that there's true reality and there's mistaken reality. And this is what Abhidharma is about. Abhidharma is indicating that there's a higher reality. And then there's the conceptual reality that our conceptual minds live in. And he was pointing out that the path involves understanding the difference between these two. Understanding the way that conceptuality arises from that mistaken view of the sense of self that we then project upon the basis of the factors of actual experience. And the main scheme he used for explaining that is the 5 skandhas. Skandhas being a Sanskrit word meaning heap or collection. When he says heap or collection, he's saying that there's an almost limitless number of different factors and elements occurring all the time that make up our experience, that make up this world. And you can group them into little bundles based on their similarity. The strategy that the belief in a self is based on is viewing things as a whole, as one. There's one me, there's one you, there's one table, one chair. Instead of understanding that there's a myriad number of countless factors occurring all the time, everywhere. So the strategy of Buddhism in approaching the ignorance of the belief in the self as a continuous, independent, and unitary entity is to break down our experience, both intellectually through study and through meditative experience. Through study we divide our experience into categories. And then in meditation, we watch how those factors interact without adding the additional karmic momentum of the commentator. It's constantly judging, labeling, categorizing, commenting on our experience. And by doing that, we gradually see the karmic momentum of our mind through its conditioning from the moment of birth, or maybe before that, until this very moment when we sit down and look at it. That karmic momentum, because we're not adding to it in meditation, begins to slow down just a little bit. And if we continue to watch that process carefully, without engaging in it, without feeling bad about it, without feeling good about it, the operating system of that mechanism starts to experience little blips, little gaps. And those gaps allow us to see that apparent continuity of our experience is like a film that has frames with gaps in between each. And we begin to get a little sense of the mistake of the belief in an I, and how we can work with that situation through further study and practice. Over 2,500 years, those core teachings of the Buddha have obviously evolved tremendously into different ways of experiencing them, different ways of framing the situation, different ways of practicing, different levels of understanding, and so forth. And this program that Tashi has magically put together for us will bring us through all those different phases as it has been received and developed and perfected in the Tibetan system of the Three Yānas. It's essential to focus on this first foundational understanding and to really come to experience it in our meditation, study it. Because if this foundation is not solid, when we try to put Mahāyāna on top of it, when we try to put Vajrayāna on top of it, they will falter. They will not be stable. The most common way that they falter is they falter into theism. As we talk about things like Buddha nature, Vajra nature, we can make the mistake of thinking that those are like me, like an I, like a self. So it's essential to really understand this beginning phase, the Abhidharma and the meditation practice. The book that we've chosen, Glimpses of Abhidharma, presents the Abhidharma by Trungpa Rinpoche from a Mahāyāna and Vajrayāna point of view, which is why it's incredibly confusing and complicated. It's a really advanced book. I experienced this about 10 years ago. I was asked to teach this at a retreat called the Profound Treasury, led by Judy Leaf, that Barry Boyce and I created in 2012. And I discovered, having read this book many years ago, 40 years ago, I discovered how difficult this book is. So we touch it, and instead of rejecting it, instead of being confused completely by it, we have a sense that it's opening up a different, a larger, an alternative way of viewing the skandhas, the Abhidharma. Something that ideally we revisit over and over again through the years. And expand our understanding and appreciation and experience of its teachings grows and develops in that way. On the other hand, I urge you to study other books on the subject of Abhidharma and meditation. Some of you may know Stephen Goodman. He was a dear friend of Dzogchen Khyentse Rinpoche and on the board of Khyentse Foundation for many years. Before he died untimely a number of years ago, he put out a book called The Buddhist Psychology of Awakening. Excellent foundational book on Abhidharma. And for meditation, who could be better to explain the presentation of Trungpa Rinpoche than his student, Pema Chodron, how to meditate. I've exceeded my allotted time. I know I will be penalized and punished, but I thought it was worth it I'm so happy to connect with you and that you're looking at this amazing material. Thank you very much. So let's shift into our breakout groups.
And before I open the rooms, I will just say quickly that we have Chinese rooms from 1 to 6, and room number 7 is Spanish, room number 8 is French, and Portuguese is in the room 9. And everyone is free to choose their own room. So if you end up in a room where you don't want to be, just go to the bottom panel, choose breakout rooms, and just scroll to choose the one you want. And if you speak English, try to, go to the group which doesn't have a lot of participants. That also happens. Okay, happy discussion.
Please feel free to come forward, raise your hand, and offer some additional information that I left out, or correction, or question. Ina or email. Is there someone that can read the questions in the chat?
Well, Helena, can you translate the latest question in Chinese? Or someone else? Wait, I'm asking Claude to do it, so
Okay.
maybe that will help. Okay.
Otherwise, I can.
Yeah, I have a question from Rachel. She's asking about the study of Abhidharma, our study. Apart from Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche's teaching, should we also study or refer to the Abhidharma Kosha? It's a very interesting question indeed. In addition, does the explanation of the momentary cycle involve the Sarvāstivāda doctrine that phenomena in the past, present, and future all exist substantially? Sarvam Asti. That was a question from the Chinese group.
Wow, that's a cool question. So the first part, yeah, by all means, to study the kosha. The kosha on its own is rather difficult to decipher. So it's best to study the kosha through commentaries. And my understanding from Tashi was that there was 2 books that were provided as supplementary reading for the Khenpo's teachings. And one of them is a commentary by a gentleman named Chim, C-H-I-M. And his text is referred to as Chim's Treasury, which in Tibetan is D-Z-O. So it's called Chim's. And that book is amazing. That is an incredible commentary, including the introduction. The introduction is just so helpful in understanding Abhidharma. I would recommend you start with the introduction to that book. It's so cool, so good. Chögyam Trungpa is the author. And I believe it was in the forum of readings for the Khenpo's teachings. And maybe Tashi or someone can send a link to it there. Ornament, thank you. Ornament of Abhidharma is the text name. The translation is part of Thupten Chenpo's Library of Tibetan Classics. Amazing production of works. And secondly, yes, the simple answer is yes, that the Abhidharma Kosha presents the Sarvāstivāda point of view of the persistence, or this sort of strange presence of dharmas through the past, present, and future, in the sense that we can think about something that happened in the past, and we can think about something that might happen in the future. And as you may have picked up already, what Vasubandhu does is, in his commentary to his own root text, he disagrees with the Sarvāstivāda view and presents the Sautrantika view, which does not agree with the Sarvāstivāda view on this point, which is a bit of an obscure point.
Thanks, Derek. There is another question that Rachel kindly translated for us, and it goes like this. What is the basis for distinguishing neurotic manifestations from emotional manifestation? What classification framework or the criteria underlies this distinction? Is it a distinction made from the perspective of conventional truth?
it's a distinction made from the point of view of the unity of the two truths in the what's called the fundamental teaching of Buddhism of selflessness, of the absence of self. That emotionality that arises from the fundamental mistaken notion of the belief in a self is neurotic emotionality. An emotionality that arises from the understanding of egolessness or selflessness is enlightened emotionality, which takes the form of compassion in its different manifestations or its different stages: loving kindness, compassion, and great compassion. And that's the distinguishing mark, is the fixation on self. Samsara is belief in a self, and all dharmas agree at that one point that there is no self. So when we talk about neurosis, or conflicting emotions, we're talking about that complex reactivity that arises from this mistaken fundamental fixation on me, mine, and other. Thank you.
Thank you. Pallavi is asking on behalf of someone in her group that they expressed a wish to have more clarity in a simple language about the difference between the sixth, seventh, and the eighth consciousness. Can you please elaborate on this in a simple language?
The sixth consciousness is the thinking mind, is the mind that has discrete thoughts. It uses the framework of conceptuality. The seventh consciousness is the background observer, the internal commentator, the watcher that's constantly present throughout any conscious moment, whether it's a sixth consciousness moment or a moment of one of the other five consciousnesses. Rinpoche says it has that creepy quality, constantly being there, and constantly clouds the experience of the other consciousnesses. And it clouds it with this sort of confusion that comes from the belief in the self, belief that it exists. So every moment of consciousness, until we're able to uproot, dispel the myth of belief in a self, at which point the seventh consciousness disappears. Every moment of consciousness is infused with that cloudy, creepy seventh consciousness that's constantly thinking me. The eighth consciousness is the container. It's the container of all the karmic momentum from past experience, from present experience, and it's the container from which current experience arises, from that vast field of all possible karmic momentums. So every moment of experience we're further building or adding to the eighth consciousness, and we're experiencing material arising from that eighth consciousness. And in the view expressed here, which is the view that underlies the later Mahāyāna tradition, or arises from that, and is the view that is the foundation for the Vajrayāna traditions of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, of the Kagyu and Nyingma in particular, is that the external environment is the projection of the eighth consciousness. And that's the point of view from which Trungpa Rinpoche in the chapter on form presents form as being part of the consciousness. He's coming from that point of view that the eighth consciousness is the container of the potentiality of form and all other experience. So I failed a little bit at the end there. I got a little bit complicated instead of staying with simple, but I hope that was okay.
There are a few clarifications in the chat. Is the analysis used in analytical meditation performed by the sixth consciousness?
Yes, it is. So the sixth consciousness can use conceptuality as a way of understanding itself, as a way of understanding the whole complex, and thereby disrupting the complex. Always in reaction to this issue of how can we use conceptuality to progress into a non-conceptual framework. We'll see reference to a sutra called the Questions of Kashyapa, where the Buddha presents an analogy of when a fire starts on its own in the woods from there being really dry branches on dead trees that are blown by the wind, and the friction eventually produces a spark that lands in the dry leaves below those trees and produces fire. And then that fire burns up the leaves and the trees and the branches. In the same way, conceptuality rubbing against itself. So when we create a conceptual framework like the five skandhas, and then we analyze our experience, and in particular, identify the sense of self by having what's called the pointing out of ignorance given to us. Many of you, I'm sure, will have experienced the pointing out the true nature of mind as the entryway or part of the Vajrayāna. But ideally, before that, someone has pointed out to you ignorance by insulting you, or embarrassing you, or surprising you. And when that happens, your sense of self arises in a visceral way. Like, what? Me? And that's the innate sense of self. And that's the sense of self that we then compare to the skandhas, to the framework, using conceptual mind. Outside of the cushion, we do that in a discursive way, through the categories and the labels. In meditation, we do that in a non-discursive or less, it's impossible to be non-discursive, but less discursive way. So we do that analysis in a subtle way, and we use conceptuality to burn itself up. What else?
Seems like there was a lot of food for thought. People are just...
What a great phrase, huh? As if thoughts can eat.
Let's let's have a live question from Andrew. Andrew, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Derek. It's in relation to the gap, as you called it, and how being aware of that gap. So I suppose the question is there an awareness of the gap, regardless of which consciousness is looking at it, and how conceptual it is? The gap itself, is it more that you've noticed that there was a gap? You know, there's a point where you're trying to look at that gap, but the point of looking at it, becomes conceptual again. Am I making sense here? You
Totally,
got a smile.
yeah,
You got a smile on my face, like, yeah, I don't know about this fella.
Yeah, totally. Rinpoche talks about the experience of the gap as being in retrospect.
Yeah, there you go.
And that depends on how genuine the gap is. We all have gaps during the day where they're like little gaps in like maybe the conversation or the flow of events. And it's just like a little bit of a shift where we're able to check our phone or, something like that. So that's like a not a genuine gap that he's talking about. So what he's talking about is where there's nobody keeping track for a moment. And so it's like we don't know if there's awareness because it's like we weren't there. Mm-hmm. And it's instantaneous. And the next moment we realize that there was the gap by virtue of not remembering what happened, as opposed to remembering some other thing that happened during the gap. We remember afterwards, oh, there was a little bit of a blip. And his most important instruction at that point is to let go, disown the gap. Because there's a tendency to want to like analyze it and capture it and prolong it. And that becomes then a conceptualized recreation. That's not helpful because it has a subtle similarity to the gap and we can easily mistake it for a genuine gap. So the way to produce the gap is to disconnect from the content by watching the content, not suppressing it, not pushing it away, but relaxing that activity of classifying, labeling, and judgment that goes on most of the time. And then gradually, gaps become more frequent. And as you progress in your gapping, the gaps will become more profound. It will become deeper. Because if you had a true gap where you saw Vajra nature or Buddha nature or Rigpa, you wouldn't come back into the conceptual framework. So we're seeing like a little glimpse of like the reflection of complete unconditional mind in retrospect.
Thank you very much. How does one distinguish between a really elaborate false view, conceptualized view, and being aware of like the reflection or residue of it? You know, you talked about you can get really subtle and clever with it. Like, how clever can you get with this? Like,
yeah, usually you can tell, but because of the emotional investment in what you felt that experience was, it's like, oh, that was special. Mm. To the extent that you think it's like really special, then you know you're going down the wrong path. When it's nothing special, then it tends to be more genuine. It's like, oh, how's that?
Nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What else?
Well, we have another academic sort of question. How do we understand the distinction between the seventh consciousness and a wisdom of discriminating awareness, pratyavikshana jnana?
Yeah, cool. So the seventh consciousness is that ever-present, creepy, cloudy mind that Rinpoche talked about. And when we are able to transform our consciousnesses into the Buddha wisdoms through cultivating the path, study, practice, virtue, and so forth, then the consciousnesses all transform into different wisdoms of the five Buddha wisdoms. And that seventh consciousness has that ability. They all have this ability to go the other way. And we saw a little bit of a touch on this idea that sort of underneath the whole fabric of the 8 consciousnesses is the ultimate ground, the Alaya. And when we're able to connect to the Alaya without projecting a sense of self to it, and just experiencing that complete, open, vibrant, clear knowing, non-dualistic knowing, then immediately all the consciousnesses flip and arise as wisdom. And that's the sense of co-emergence. At every moment we have the opportunity to have that flip happen. Earlier in Mahāyāna tradition described as a turning around. In the 8th consciousness, a revolution. In the Vajrayāna, referred to maybe as transformation or recognition. And the diluted aspect of the consciousnesses and the minds all turn into the wisdom aspects. And that process is a very difficult and long-term and nuanced process that hopefully you will be studying in detail throughout maybe this course, ideally, but hopefully throughout your paths. And this is what Vajrayāna practice is all focused on, is co-emergence, experiencing what co-emergence, from what and how. Leah, shall we go to another live question?
Yep. I wanted to ask a couple of questions, if that's all right. The first question is, there was a part in the book that says pain and pleasure are independent, and I kind of started reading and thinking that everything is dependent, like dependent origination. So I was just wondering what Trungpa Rinpoche meant when he said that they're independent.
I'm not really sure. Can you read the specific or tell us where it is? Something like that would depend a lot on the context.
Oh, I could not find it because I just read the whole thing really
Yeah,
quick.
I know what you mean. You read through it and then certain things stick in your mind. You can't find them. That happens. Well, maybe later if you find it, you can feel free to contact me. I think through the email. Did you have a second?
Yes. My second question is kind of related with the gap. I find that I'm more like, when there's a compulsion, there's really this feeling that I kind of have to do that. There's no gaps, and I'm just noticing just the way you speak. You have this gap, like you have this energy of natural gaps in just my view. So maybe if you have any suggestions on how I can cultivate this more and just in a practical sense, is I guess my second one.
Yeah, just I think it's a matter of in meditation practice, just becoming as aware as possible of the momentum, the feeling of momentum that's underneath our conceptual mind, underneath our discursive mind that's like thinking of doing this or thinking of doing that, or that's reacting impulsively to situations. Think of the chain of the nidanas, the 12 nidanas, and the link between grasping for something and fixation, which is then the tipping point for the remainder of the nidanas. Once you have that fixation quality, it immediately turns into becoming, birth, old age, and so forth. And so there's a point in the development of our momentary mental experience where it flips into an unavoidable continuity of that moment. But somewhere like in the middle, between when that initial impulse arises, or it's actually, let me take out the word initial, when that impulse arises to react, noticing that impulse, and by noticing it over time, over and over again, noticing, reacting, and internally reacting, and then externally reacting. If you can notice that over and over and over again, you can begin to sense the internal reaction as it's happening, and then before it's happening. And to the extent that you're able to notice it before it's happening, you then gain the ability to not react. Maybe as much, maybe as fully, and gradually it wears away. And so it's just a matter of working back in your experience to when this or that happens. Notice the feeling tone, notice the so you hear or see something as the form skandha. And then there's this subtle there's this subtle feeling, reaction, positive or negative, or doesn't involve me, neutral. So that's the first thing, is that subtle reactivity. And then you label it. You say, oh, it's so-and-so, it's something. And then the labeling brings up associations. And the associations then sort of gather the momentum for the reaction. So if you can watch that process happen in meditation, the meditation practice is the training ground. And the magic in the meditation technique of Trungpa Rinpoche, I'm not sure if people have picked up on this yet, but his technique is to not have a continuous object. We follow the out-breath, then we have a gap. So we're practicing gap. And for years, literally, during the in-breath, it forces psychological material to come up from the subconscious. First, not even from the subconscious. First, just discursive thought. What am I doing here? Why did I get sucked into meditation? When is it going to be over? Etc. And then gradually, like weird thoughts from the past and big experiences that we haven't resolved, relationships and things, come up. And we gain that ability to see that process of the initial feeling, tone, reaction, and then the labeling reaction, and then the emotional reaction. And then either verbal or physical reaction, or just thought, like concretizing. That's bad. So meditation is the key, seeing that in meditation, and then bringing that mindfulness into what we call post-meditation, which is a nice way of referring to the remainder of our life. And constantly seeing that process unfolding in our mind all the time. So we're all in the same boat at the moment, thinking, oh, we're over time, we're late, it's 11:03, right? We see the time, get that sense of urgency, and then we have the context of time and space. And then we're going to act on that and say goodbye, I presume. So good luck with that. I hope that made some sense. Thank you very much.
Very much so. Thank you.
That does sound like a perfect closer, but we do have one more question. Louisa, do you want to turn on your video or unmute yourself and speak?
Thank you so much for everything here. I don't know if you can answer this question. What exactly is happening when the consciousness slips into, like, I don't know how to describe it, a chakra, and merges with, I don't know what it's merging with, what the word is, but do you understand what I'm asking?
Oh, Derek, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. The chakras are affiliated or associated with different skandhas. When you study the Vajrayāna context of the skandhas and the consciousnesses, you will begin to find presentations that have these really complicated charts where they line everything up. So you have the skandhas, and you have the consciousnesses, and you have the chakras, and you have the four karmas, you have the different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and you have the wisdoms, and everything is all associated. And so there's this subtle but powerful relationship between different levels of the skandhas and the consciousnesses and our chakra system. And so when you experience a certain focus of energy or attention in a certain part of the psychic or subtle body system, that is correlated to the experience of sort of being focused in one stage of the progression of the skandhas. And if you're able to sort of identify that energy, it gives you a very helpful way of understanding the skandha. And ideally, it gives you a helpful way of understanding the full progression of the skandhas and how those skandhas are energy centers in our body, and which are really sort of energy centers in our psyche. And the most important part, of course, is how we then project a sense of self onto them.
Yeah, so it's kind of the progression of releasing, like, the knot of that, or obscuration. So by going through all the chakras, then eventually your consciousness, I suppose, is merged with the non-self. Is that right? I don't know.
It is. I mean, this is the very advanced and sort of esoteric Vajrayāna description of the progression of the path as the loosening of the knots around the the chakra centers, where the energies have become convoluted into what we call the knots. And those are then avenues into releasing the fixation and the sense of self in different aspects of our psyche. So it's like approaching the same process from different angles.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, should we call it a class?
Yeah, and so
No,
just one last minute is I encourage you all again to study and read as much about this as you can, and remember the importance of it as a foundation. So as Tashi, and the other teachers of this amazing program launch you out into outer space of the Mahāyāna and Vajrayāna, remember that you have to buckle your seatbelt of the Hinayana and the Abhidharma is the key. So keep coming back to that and keep understanding that until that's stable, the rest is a little wobbly, and that they work together. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to meet with you all. So let's close with the dedication of merit, I think.
Oh, just a little. Yeah. Let's close with the dedication of merit, and then there will
Or was Tashi gonna say something?
Small announcement. Just a second.
Announcements, good.
Okay, let's first dedicate the merit while we still have it. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay.
By
Will
this
you lead us,
merit,
Derek?
sure. Thank you. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara. May I free all beings. May all beings be free. Sorry. That's it. Everything else until that line is the same as the one that Trungpa Rinpoche used. So my habit pattern filled in the rest. I like that change though here.
Thank you so much, Derek. I guess we all were very, very happy to have you in this class and to have a glimpse of your brilliance and deepest knowledge about the Abhidharma. And I just want to invite everyone to watch the recordings that we are sending out because we have a lot of new participants. So I just wanted to go through some housekeeping details. So yeah, we are going to send this recording in the newsletter, and it's always uploaded in the Google folder, along with the AI summary of this session. And also, next week, we're going to meet for the Mahāyāna model of our course. So that's very exciting. And the readings for that course already uploaded in the Google Drive folder. So if you are not in a mood of waiting for the link coming to your inbox, you can just go and check Google folders and find all the readings there. And so we'll see you. A lot of people have raised hands, so I'm not sure what is happening, but we're not gonna take any more questions. But we'll see you in the next class. And I'm gonna ask everyone to unmute themselves now to say bye and thank you to Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you,
Much.
Derek.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank
you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Derek.
Really
The fun
powerful. Thank you
part.
so much.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.